The hostess looked confused. Sorry, sir. That reservation was used last night. Name's Marshall 61, retired school CFO. The tie I wore still smelled faintly of mothballs, and the voucher in my pocket signed in her handwriting wasn't mine. Ever had a surprise meant for you? Used on someone else? Tell me what you'd do. I wore the tie she bought me 5 anniversaries ago, navy silk with a fine diagonal herringbone still crisp, still carrying a whiff of the cedar drawer I kept it in. That tie had only ever made its appearance once a year, always on October 14th, and always for her. I stepped into Riverstone just past 6. The air inside was warmer than I remembered, heavy with rosemary wine, and the comforting clatter of ceramic on polished wood. Couples leaned close in their candlelit corners, laughter flickering like the flames in their glasses. Reservation for Marshall Wexler, I said, handing over my coat with one hand and cradling a modest bouquet in the other, roses, Celeste's favorite. The hostess, no more than 19, with a discreet nose ring and ballet flat posture, gave me a courteous nod and turned to her screen. She frowned, typed again, and squinted at the monitor as though willing my name to appear. I'm sorry, sir, she said with a small wince. That reservation's already been used. I blinked. I don't think so. I made it 2 weeks ago. Anniversary. She tapped the screen again, clicked once more, then looked back at me with tentative concern. It was used last night. Same name. Table 12. There was no mistaking it. I'd booked table 12 because it was the one facing the terrace. Celeste liked to see the river at dusk, even in October, even through glass. I managed to smile. Could you check the ledger? Sometimes my name ends up under my middle initial. She hesitated, then bent to pull out a black folder with copper-gilded edges. A worn ledger lived inside beside a few handwritten vouchers. Her manicured fingers flipped pages until she paused. There was a voucher, she said, retrieving it. Handwritten, this one. It was tucked neatly in the seam. Cream cardstock. Our names scrawled in a delicate script that wasn't mine. Above the signature, to us. Always. Below it, Celeste W. I stared. It was her handwriting, slanted, deliberate, with the telltale loop on the lowercase l. It was real. When was this redeemed? Last night, she said softly. Same table, same time. I thanked her, or at least I think I did. The voucher went into my pocket with the careful reverence of someone placing a relic back in a shrine. The hostess offered to find another table, but I declined. I didn't say why. The truth hung unspoken in the space between us. Something had cracked, and both of us felt it. I turned, still holding the roses. They had started to droop a little in the humidity of my coat lining. Outside, the first drops of a light drizzle kissed my forehead. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching the headlights blur into ribbons across wet cobblestones. Then something tugged at me. I turned back to the window just for a moment. Inside, a server passed by carrying a dessert tray. On it, a single ramekin of chocolate soufflé. I felt my mouth go dry. Celeste is allergic to chocolate. She always has been. Since her first reaction at age 11, the scent alone was enough to tighten her chest. I stood frozen, watching the tray disappear into the kitchen's swinging door. A couple brushed past me on their way in, laughing as though they'd just fallen in love on the curb. The man held the door for her. I glanced down at the roses, now damp from drizzle and sagging slightly at the stems. I didn't throw them away. I simply walked. No destination, no umbrella. My hands were trembling by the time I reached the corner. The voucher was still in my pocket, warming with my body heat, the ink slowly bleeding where the paper had caught a raindrop. Somewhere behind me, Riverstone's warm light faded. The building hadn't changed much. Langston High still smelled like floor wax and cafeteria lasagna. As I turned the key to my old office, the lock stuck for a second, then gave way with a familiar metallic groan. The placard on the door read, Marshall W. Carver, CFO. The vinyl lettering curling at the corners like it too had given up waiting for me. Inside, the air was stale. Dust danced in beams of November light cutting through the blinds. The walls wore faded motivational posters I'd put up years ago. Integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching. I laughed under my breath. The irony burned a little more than I expected. My old desk welcomed me with an abandoned mug, its coffee dried into a tarry ring. The same stack of budget requests from the AP department still sat in the to-review tray, their pages yellowed and curling like brittle leaves. They hadn't changed it. They hadn't erased me. I wasn't here to reminisce. I opened my phone. Toby's text blinked on screen. Mom said not to stir old ghosts. Why are you back at Langston? I stared at it for a long moment before locking the screen again. Mr. Carver! A soft voice broke the silence. Melinda stood in the doorway, still wearing that same chunky necklace she used to nervously twist during board meetings. Time had put silver at her temples, but her eyes carried the same alert kindness. I heard you were stopping by, she said, folding her arms. You donating those old econ textbooks you used to swear by. That's the cover story. I smiled. She arched a brow. Didn't think you were the type to chase ghosts. I motioned toward the battered filing cabinet behind my desk. Sometimes ghosts leave paper trails. She hesitated. You know I could lose my job if you ask for things that aren't public. I'm not asking for anything, I said. Just revisiting old memories. Maybe confirming a few timelines. Melinda stepped inside and closed the door behind her. It didn't take long. My old desktop password, unchanged, bless its laziness, still held the shared calendar logs. Room reservations, budget allocations, conference bookings. And there she was, Celeste Whitaker, my wife. Her name repeated like drum beats October 30th. Conference Room B, November 1st. Conference Room B, November 2nd. Conference Room B, the same room, the same times. Booked outside of standard hours. I pulled up the logs for November 2nd, the same date the Riverstone voucher was redeemed. The timestamp 6:45 p.m. Melinda hovered behind me. She used to stay late, she murmured. Said it was for grant meetings, but no one ever came through the front. Janitor said she always left through the side doors. I opened the linked expense files. Champagne, 1 bottle, charged to the department's celebration and staff morale fund. Flagged for review but marked audit waived. You see this? I turned the screen slightly. Melinda blinked. That's not protocol, and I'm pretty sure we haven't had a grant win in 6 months. I hit print to PDF, naming the file, Echo Celeste. No, I didn't want to send it from a school address. Instead, I logged into my personal email and sent it to myself. A knock on the half-closed door startled us both. The janitor, a broad-shouldered man with a mop and a knowing look, nodded. Didn't think I'd see you back here, Mr. Carver. Just passing through, I said. Sure, he replied, gaze lingering. Lot of echoes in these walls. Melinda squeezed my arm. Be careful, Marshall. I gathered my coat and slipped the USB into my pocket. The hallway hummed with fluorescent buzz. As I stepped outside, a breeze caught the door behind me, slamming it shut with a finality that startled me. I walked across the parking lot, watching fallen leaves skitter over the asphalt like whispers I couldn't catch. I unlocked my car, sat inside for a minute without turning the key. Celeste had been here, in my space, using her title, her charm, her proximity to my legacy. And now my silence. That night I couldn't sleep. At 2:14 a.m., I reread my own email. The PDF blinked back at me. 1 file, 1 breadcrumb. I replied to myself, what else don't I know? And hit send. You smell like wet doubt, Jasper said, sliding a steaming mug of black coffee across the chipped formica table. That woman playing you. I gave a dry chuckle, but it caught somewhere in my throat. The diner hadn't changed, same cracked vinyl booths, same low hum of the old ceiling fan that wobbled like it had something to say, but never did. Maple and Third was where we used to meet once a month back when I still believed in tidy accounts and predictable endings. Now I was just hoping for one sentence that made sense. Beth leaned over our booth, pad in hand. Well, I'll be. Stranger returns. Thought you moved somewhere with less grease and more retirement. Just visiting, I said. Or investigating. I haven't decided. She laughed and scribbled something. Still drink your coffee, sad and black. Wouldn't know what else to pair it with. Jasper tapped the edge of the voucher I'd slid across the table between us. The once pristine card was creased, now water-stained and beginning to curl. A corner trembled under the trembling of my own fingers. He picked it up with two of his squinted at the script. "That's her handwriting," he said. "No question. She used to copy my signature for those blasted PTA forms she didn't want to deal with. She always looped the S on always too far." "You see it?" I nodded. He leaned back. "So this was signed and used the night you thought you were reserving Riverstone, used the night before. Reservation marked under my name, same table, same time slot. Hell of a coincidence." He stirred his coffee with the end of his butter knife. "You sure she didn't just take herself out for souffle?" "She's allergic to eggs," I muttered. His brow lifted. "Then she was with someone who didn't know her well, or didn't care." I pulled out the folded log printouts. "These are from the school. Her name booked conference room B 3 nights in a row, ending the same night as that voucher. One expense flagged for champagne. Claimed under morale budget." He nodded slowly, scanning the pages. "You thinking affair or embezzlement, I'm thinking I don't know my wife." Beth dropped 2 plates in front of us, eggs sliding off toast like they'd had enough of gravity. She topped up our mugs. "You boys still fixing the world, just cleaning up one corner of it," Jasper said. She moved on and he leaned in. "You remember the fundraiser night back in November, the one Celeste bailed on last minute? Said she had a district call. I did. I'd shown up alone in a too-tight tuxedo, making excuses to half the school board about a call I knew nothing about. That was the same night. I said it more to the toast than to him. 'She's not sloppy,' he said, which means she's confident." "What are you getting at?" "She wouldn't leave tracks unless she thought no one would follow. You've already got receipts, logs, and a motive simmering on a slow burner." I sighed. "What am I supposed to do? I can't accuse her over souffle and room bookings." "You don't," he said, wiping a glob of ketchup off the corner of his thumb with a napkin. "You go where paper doesn't lie. You check the expense filings, travel reimbursements, digital trails, Ghosts love Outlook archives. You saying break into her email, I'm saying check your own first. You're her husband, right? Shared devices, synced accounts. Unless she got real careful recently, you'd be surprised what lingers." The idea chilled me, not because of what I might find, but because of how willing I suddenly was to look. After we paid Jasper, tossing a handful of coins into the cracked mason jar labeled Beth's retirement, with a wink, we stood on the curb under a gunmetal sky. Rain threatened but hadn't committed yet. The breeze tasted like something old and unsettled. "She's good," Jasper said as we shook hands. "But you were the best damn numbers man this town's seen. Don't forget that." I drove straight home, skipping my usual errand detours. In the quiet of the house, I opened my laptop and logged into the shared iCloud account we'd used to back up files, one of those things neither of us remembered to sever after I retired. Emails sat in the folder, hundreds, most benign. But one thread buried under a folder labeled MISC. Admin caught my eye. Subject Confa Room B, sent November 1st, 10:14 p.m. From Celeste Whitaker at Langston.K12. Oh, us to redacted at consulting.net. "Thanks for last night. Can we keep this between us?" He still doesn't. That's where it ended. No follow-up, no reply. Just a draft, saved in the sent folder, half-formed, like even she wasn't ready to finish the sentence. My breath caught. I read it again and again. Then I hit forward, to myself. Subject line, Jasper was right. And hit send. I slid the envelope across the table. "Can you explain this, Celeste?" Her hand trembled just slightly, so faint most would miss it. But not me. I'd seen that twitch before years ago when she first told me about the miscarriage. She hadn't dared share with anyone else. The boardroom at Langston High was decked in garlands and wreaths, holiday cheer, forced upon mahogany formality. The windows were frosted from the December chill, and a faint scent of peppermint clung to the air. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. They always did, but somehow today, it was all I could hear. Celeste sat at the far end, sharp in a deep green blazer, her hair pinned, her eyes unreadable. Toby leaned beside her, tall arms crossed, jaw rigid. His tie was askew, like he'd put it on in the car. I remained standing, the envelope now resting between us. It looked thinner than it had this morning. Maybe it was the way the light caught it. Maybe it was the weight of the moment crushing it slowly. "I'm not sure what you're implying." Celeste said, her voice even but brittle. These are work expenses, student mentoring dinners, outreach meetings. The school has always encouraged initiative. Mr. Lowry, seated beside me, adjusted his glasses. Mr. Weller, he said, do you have supporting documentation? I nodded. Logs from Room B, booking entries under Celeste's name, receipts tied to a school account, and a dessert she's allergic to. I tapped the envelope gently, plus this voucher used at Riverstone the night before our anniversary. Ms. Patel across the table frowned. Are you suggesting fraud? I'm suggesting patterns, I said. Ones that deserve clarity. Toby shifted his gaze, flicking to the envelope, then to his mother, then to me. He looked like a boy again for a flicker before he masked it in adulthood. Celeste reached for the papers. These logs are incomplete. Anyone can reserve rooms. As for Riverstone, I was there with donors. I told you that. No, I replied quietly. You didn't. There was a hush just long enough for everyone to hear the heat vents click on. The festive wreath above the whiteboard tilted slightly, caught on a bent nail. The peppermint smell now mixed with something sterile metallic. Lowry leaned forward. I think it would be prudent for the board to commission a full audit. That's absurd, Celeste snapped, and for the first time her voice cracked. You're taking a man's bruised ego and turning it into policy. No one's accusing anyone, Patel said, raising a calming hand. But given the financial irregularities. Celeste laughed tight. Try running a district post-COVID and see what you misplace. I didn't flinch. This isn't about misplacement, it's about trust. Toby stood abruptly. This isn't the place. Celeste turned to him. You believe this? He didn't answer, just stared at the voucher, now partly visible, half tucked under meeting minutes. The envelope corner had split open, revealing the note inside. To us, always. I didn't need to show it. He remembered her handwriting. I think we should take a short recess, Lowry announced, already rising. As the room stirred, Celeste reached out and brushed the envelope from the table. It fluttered to the floor with an almost delicate sound. When she bent to retrieve it, I stepped forward first, lifting it silently. The corner had fully torn now, a thin diagonal scar across the flap. I didn't look inside. I just placed it into my coat pocket. Outside, the sky had turned from silver to slate. Toby followed me into the hall, his steps heavy. For a moment, he said nothing. Then if you go through with this, you're not just burning her, you're burning me. I looked at him. My son. My boy who used to carry his mother's coffee cup to the car when she was running late. Who used to wait at the window for me to come home from budget meetings. Who now stood before me, man-shaped but unsure which way to lean. Sometimes I said softly, truth lights more than it burns. But I wasn't sure I believed it yet. The room smelled of lemon polish and old guilt. I sat in front of the internal auditor and slid the file across. Check the dates. Ms. Givens didn't look up right away. Her glasses were halfway down her nose, her fingers busy with a yellow legal pad, marking something I couldn't read. Her office was tight, claustrophobic, even with filing cabinets hugging the walls like silent witnesses. Snow tapped on the frosted window behind her, matching the rhythm of my nerves. You said you worked here how long, she asked, finally brushing a post-it from the folder's edge. 26 years, I said. 10 as CFO. She gave a small nod, then opened the file with surgical precision. Line by line, she read, silent as snowfall. I watched her face for changes. Tightened brow, lifted chin, pursed lips. When she reached the expense-marked lodge, private, her pen paused. This was approved by CW. She murmured, eyes flicking toward me. That Celeste Warner, I only nodded. I thought she was in curriculum. She still is technically, I replied. But she's taken liberties. I could see her digesting that carefully, like someone judging the freshness of milk past its date. She turned the page. And these receipts, dinner, champagne, multiple rooms booked under school hours, I said. Same night she told me she had a late mentorship session. She's not your supervisor anymore, correct? No one is. I'm retired, but I can still smell rot when I step on it. That earned the faintest smirk. We were quiet again, save for the sound of cabinets clacking outside and the snow melting off my shoes. I reached for the coffee I brought but didn't drink. Still hot. A text buzzed in Jasper. Board split. She's leaking sympathy stories already. I read it, exhaled slow. Another ping followed a screenshot. Celeste in the Langston board group chat. He's not well. He's been unstable since retirement. I'm worried. I turned the phone face down. Miss Givens didn't react. She had already turned to another set of documents, flipping past my annotations, studying the originals. You said these were backdated. Look at the approval sequence. They're signed post-event, not pre-approved. Check metadata on the scanned PDFs. She looked impressed, or at least curious. And this account, she tapped the screen, not part of school budget joint account. Hers and someone else's, not mine. Another beat of silence. She nodded slowly. Well, she said this just became an internal audit. And with that, I felt the floor tilt beneath me, not in panic, but relief. The first gust of clean air through a room long shut. Later that day, I found myself outside Celeste's office. Her door was ajar. No one was there. I wasn't proud of it, but I stepped in. The room was too tidy, not her style. A staged neatness, as if everything had been wiped down for eyes she didn't trust. I walked to her desk and opened the top drawer. Paper clips, extra staples, sticky notes, and then folded and tucked under a notebook, a note, thick cardstock, feminine script. I'll never forget Denver. No name, no date, no context. But it wasn't mine. I didn't mean to cry, but I did. Not from betrayal, just relief. The photo showed them together all right. But the third person, my son. The air inside the archive room smelled of cedar and dust, soft, warm, aged. Like an attic that had been loved once and left alone to remember. Henry the archivist shuffled ahead of me, his keyring jingling with every step. This way, he said. We keep the guest logbooks and promotional materials in the back. You said 2022. I nodded. November, mid-month. Got it, he said, crouching low to pull a beige box from the bottom shelf. Funny how specific dates stick with people. Funny indeed. He set the box down with a thump and carefully opened the lid. Inside were laminated pamphlets, folded menus, and a leather-bound guest book thick with time. He flipped it open, his fingers practiced. I watched his lips move silently as he skimmed names. Then he tapped a line. Celeste Warner, room 214. Checked in with T. Warner and guest. Here it is. I leaned in. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, precise, a little flourish at the tail of the W. Anything else? I asked. He pulled out a slim envelope tucked in the side. Photo cards. They do these promo shots for anniversaries, engagements, that sort of thing. Guests can opt out. She didn't. He handed it to me gently. I hesitated before pulling the card out. The photo was glossy, a little bent at the corner. There they were. Celeste in a deep burgundy coat. Toby standing beside her, one arm around a woman I didn't recognize, brunette soft eyes smiling wide. In Celeste's hands, a small velvet box. The breath caught in my throat. A memory, Toby missing Thanksgiving. Celeste brushing off my questions. It's just a work trip, she'd said. A last-minute thing. I'd believed her. Henry didn't speak. Just let me stand there staring. Then my phone buzzed. Toby, incoming call. I picked up. Dad. His voice was hoarse. I'm at the lodge. Silence. I saw the picture. More silence. Then she wanted it to be a surprise. She didn't tell you because I didn't want her to. I was going to propose that night. To her, yes. Her name's Clara. We met in Denver. The air felt heavier suddenly, as if the room leaned in to listen. But Celeste said it was the budget vote that day, I said. She tried to reschedule. Clara couldn't. Her family flew in. I was scared if I told you you'd ruin it. Or worse, not come at all. I would have come, I said softer than I meant to. Toby exhaled one of those breaths that shakes more than it soothes. I messed it up. I know I did. No, I said. You just didn't know what to do with two truths. A pause. Then the line went quiet. Not hung up, just still. I didn't move either. Later, Henry returned with a small envelope. One last thing, he said. She left this at the desk. Never mailed it. It was addressed to me, my name written in her hand. Inside a voucher, the same one I had found before, but this one was newer, crisper. On the back, a note. For the man who taught our son what commitment means. Sorry I couldn't explain in time. I sat by the lodge's fireplace, the photo and note in my lap. The flames danced, casting gold and copper on the stone hearth. I unfolded the voucher, then slowly folded it again, creased it neatly down the middle, and tucked it back in the envelope. Not torn, just folded. There's a difference. You look like a man who just saw his future in the past tense. Jasper slid the plate across to me, burger, lukewarm pickle, half hanging the bun, slightly caved in like it had given up mid-sentence. We were back in the corner booth at Maple Diner, where napkin doodles from local school kids still hung on the wall, curled at the edges like autumn leaves that refused to drop. I blinked, then gave a soft, dry laugh. Not far off, I said, nudging the plate with the back of my hand. Except the future has ketchup stains. Jasper's laugh rumbled from deep in his chest. Well, that's better than blood, I'd say. It had been 2 weeks since the audit wrapped up its first phase. Celeste had stepped away from any discretionary budget authority, but not from her position. Her supporters, mostly parents of the kids she coached and mentored, had argued she meant well that all roads to hell are paved with over-detailed invoices. The board had split like a cell in mitosis, equal tense unresolved. And me, I'd spent most mornings watching the snow melt off the porch roof and refreeze by dusk. I hadn't opened the voucher since Colorado. It stayed folded, lined with the crease of an almost decision. I saw Toby, Jasper said, breaking into my thoughts. He looked like you after that time we tried to install your screen door upside down. I smiled faintly. Defensive, guilty, but hopeful. A waitress dropped off more coffee and I nodded thanks without making eye contact. It was Beth again, her name tag slightly askew, and she'd stopped calling me a stranger 3 visits ago. Have you spoken to him? Jasper asked. I shook my head. He sent a message. Said he'd stop by today. Jasper leaned forward. Then maybe don't treat this like a cross-examination. You're not in court. You're at a diner. The burger's cold, but the kid's probably not. Before I could reply, the door jingled. Wind followed Toby, entangling his scarf and knocking a paper turkey decoration off the corkboard. He caught it mid-fall and stared at it as if it deserved a moment of grief. Mind if I join? He asked, eyes flicking between us. Of course, I said, sliding the menu across. He didn't take it, just sat. Fingers clasped tight the same way I used to hold my pencil before a final exam. I owe you both an apology, Toby began. Especially you, Dad. I said nothing. Let the silence stretch, not out of punishment, but because I knew he needed the room to find his words. I thought I could control how things unfolded. The lodge, the timing, the board vote. Mom told me not to mix personal with official, but I thought if I planned enough, if I accounted for everything, he stopped exhaling. Jasper nodded. Life doesn't read spreadsheets, son. Toby let out a bitter chuckle. No, it redlines them. He reached into his bag and pulled out a binder, not one of Celeste's slick leather folios, but a battered 3-ring with a cracked plastic cover. A label read Budget Draft V2. What's this? I asked, taking it carefully. Something better, he said. A proposal, financial literacy night, once a month. Students and parents together, open books, no signatures hidden in margins. I flipped through. It wasn't fancy, but it was clear, honest, practical, and funded by unused stipends, the ones that went to committee chairs for holiday parties and retreats. His voice carried air quotes like punctuation. Jasper grinned. Now there's the kind of corruption I'd happily kill off. I traced a finger over 1-page budget line items with actual explanations. No acronyms, no misdirection. I like it, I said. Toby seemed stunned. On one condition, I added, every session includes both students and their parents. No closed doors. He nodded slowly. Yeah, that's fair. Across the booth, Jasper pushed his untouched burger toward Toby. Eat. You can't reform a district on an empty stomach. Toby looked at the food, then at me. Can we fix what we broke? I didn't answer with words. Instead, I reached across the table, my hand open steady, and for the first time in months, Toby took it. His grip was unsure, slightly damp with nerves, but he didn't let go, and neither did I. The envelope was torn now, but I sealed it with yellow tape and handed it to Toby. It's yours to keep or rewrite. He didn't say anything right away, just held it in both palms like something sacred or breakable. The flap was creased from too many foldings. The ink faded at the edges, but the words, "To us, always," still pressed through even under the new tape. Spring had come late this year in Langston, at least the kind of spring that warmed bones instead of teasing them. The library smelled of lemon cleaner and copy paper faintly touched with the scent of donuts someone had set out by the entrance. Laughter floated from the back hall where the teens gathered scribbling their names on workshop handouts and comparing their favorite chart doodles. Toby looked good in that blue dress shirt. He had my shoulders, poor guy, but he stood straighter now, more sure of himself than I'd seen in a long while. He'd asked me to come early, help set up. Said he wanted to get the room right. Not perfect, just right. In the entryway, we'd placed a small display table. On it sat a shadow box lined in dark velvet inside the voucher. Beside it, a typed plaque that read, "What we inherit isn't always money. Sometimes it's the courage to ask." I let my fingers rest on the glass for a second. The tape caught the light, a dull stripe of mustard yellow against ivory. There was something comforting in that imperfection, in the way time had both aged and mended the thing. When the parents arrived, they were mostly quiet at first, lingering by the coffee urns, eyeing the handouts like they might bite. But the teens were braver. One kid asked if the workshop was going to be boring. Another raised her hand mid-introduction and asked, "Is this going to tell me how to get rich on TikTok?" Toby laughed. "If it does, I'm in the wrong job." I stayed back during his opening remarks, sitting in the side row with my hands folded and eyes flicking toward the windows. Celeste was there, I'd been told. Not inside the room, but by the parking lot, leaning against the side rail in that coat she always wore too late into the season. She didn't come in, didn't wave, but she watched. Toby cleared his throat. This session was inspired by someone who taught me to ask questions, even the hard ones. Someone who reminded me that doing right is often messier than being right. And then he nodded to me. I stood slower than I used to and walked to the front. My session was called Reading Your First Paycheck, but I always started it the same way by asking the teens what they thought a paycheck looked like. Some thought it was a check. Others said a Venmo ping. I showed them the stub, the deductions, the acronyms, the chunk that disappears before they ever see it. Eyes widened, mouths twisted. A few muttered curses. We moved to mock budgets. I used old examples, minimum wage, rent averages, utility costs. They filled in blanks, debated over groceries versus gas, debated again over sneakers versus savings. At some point, I caught one teen scribbling a side note, "Don't get a car till I'm 30, or rich." At the back, Jasper stood against the bookshelf, arms crossed, grinning like someone who'd smuggled good whiskey into a church event. He gave me a wink. Later, as we handed out feedback forms and refilled the donut tray, a young girl with braces and a notebook full of highlighted lines approached me. "I wish my dad explained things like this," she said. Her voice was soft. "He's busy." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "Maybe someday you will," I said. She smiled, unsure what I meant, but nodded anyway and drifted off toward her friends. Toby joined me by the shadow box. His finger tapped the edge. I added my name, by the way, under hers. I blinked. "You signed the voucher?" "Yeah." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a duplicate. "Just the photocopy," I figured. "It's our mess. Might as well own it." We stood there a while, watching the last of the sunlight catch on the glass. Laughter from the hallway echoed like wind chimes, light and momentary, but real. The kind of sound that made buildings feel less heavy. Behind us, the room cleared out slowly. Parents lingering to ask about next sessions. Teens comparing numbers like badges. A mother asked if we'd be doing one on credit cards. Another wanted help explaining taxes to her son. Someone else mentioned bringing her cousin next time. "I think we started something," Toby murmured. "No," I said quietly, reaching out to straighten the tape on the box. "You did." The yellow tape held firm under the glass, catching the light like a quiet promise. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed while their parent explained a tax line they once feared. Life rarely wraps its lessons in clean envelopes, but sometimes what's torn can still be worth keeping. I used to believe the truth only lived in numbers. Now I know it also breathes in the space between questions and forgiveness. We don't always get the ending we expected, but we might get the beginning we needed. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? I'd love to hear your story.